So, are you DTFF?
Once again, here is Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your hosts, Dustin Lunt and Jake Trowbridge.
And welcome back to the Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football Podcast. Good evening, everyone. If you're joining us live, it is Tuesday evening, the 20th of July, 2021, Day of our Lord. Welcome to the show. We are absolutely ecstatic that you're here joining us this evening. We have got a hell of a great show for you tonight. We are here to help you tonight. Everything we're telling you, it's to help you win your redraft league this year. So these are all the tips and tricks that we utilize in our own leagues, in our home league, and against each other, I may add. All this, you're going to get all this and more tonight on DTFF. That is what we call a teaser in the business.
That's a standard operating procedure in the biz, executed to perfection by the professional Dustin Lunt.
That's right. So I have to introduce my co-host, because I would be remiss if I didn't. That would just be just poor hostmanship on my part. So Jake, my co-host, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fantastic. I too would be remiss, and I'm going to pretend that I know what that word means. I'm doing very well.
Toilet paper of the day. It's the word of the day. I can't help it.
Okay, God, it's like I don't have Google or something at my fingertips. I'm of course doing very, very well. This is always one of my favorite episodes because redraft, I mean, the season, 'tis almost upon us, and I know that you enjoy a good home league and a good redraft league, so it feels like we're right around the corner into NFL action, and that's what this goddamn episode signals. So how are you?
Yes. Oh, terrific. I there's nothing better than talking fantasy football with you, Jake. Let's be honest. I look forward to Tuesday every single night. I look forward to Tuesday every night because I love recording and doing this podcast that much. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here. This should be a lot of fun. Before we get into it, though, a little bit of breaking news today that I wanted to bring up and kind of ties in with our episode this evening. Sad news for Cam Akers. Sounds like he tore his Achilles. Out for the season, obviously. So, Jake, obviously, I wasn't very high on him going into the season. I know there's a huge hype train for Cam Akers. So let's talk redraft first here, because it's a little different with redraft and then from a dynasty perspective as well. So let's start redraft first. Obviously, he's not the guy this year. Would you draft Darrell Henderson? Where maybe not quite as high as Cam Akers was going, but I mean, should he be considered top 15? Or do you think LA is going to trade for maybe like a James Robinson or Marlon Mack, one of those guys that's out there that have kind of gotten pushed to the back burner of their specific teams?
Yeah, a couple of things right off the bat. Number one is that the reports came out today after this news broke that, you know, the Rams feel comfortable with their backfield. They're not intending to go out and make a splash signing right now. They have a guy from last year that they kind of like in Xavier. I forget his last name even. These guys on this chart were not intended to see action this year. Let's put it that way. But they are now feeling as if they're going to get pushed forward based on the Rams' reaction of not going out to signing folks. One, I think that will change. And I do think that we see somebody go there. I just don't think they're going to show those cards right away necessarily.
Yeah, I know the Rams don't necessarily have a ton of cap to make like a big splash move. But, I mean, James Robinson's on that rookie contract. And Marlon Mack, I think, re-signed for what is essentially a veteran minimum to stay with Indianapolis this year. So, I mean, I think those two in particular are very reasonable. Old man Todd Gurley, who's familiar with the Rams and their scheme, is out there as a free agent yet. So maybe they bring him in maybe as a veteran minimum with those escalators in his contract if he reaches certain milestones. But at least then that's more of like a plug and play type player where he already understands what's going on with the team. So what do you think about that move possibly?
I mean, it's fine from a scheme fit perspective. If you want to bring back Gurley, fine. And somebody is going to do it before the season starts. He's going to be on a roster before the season starts. And sure, go ahead and bring Gurley. He would not be the number one on that team if he was signed. It would be Darrell Henderson. And I think there's an interesting argument to be made about this backfield right now, which is Cam Akers was going, I believe, RB11, RB12 in ADP right before this happened. So you said, do I put Darrell Henderson in the top 15 now with him out? It's like, well, he's not as good of a football player as Cam Akers is. And maybe not. Maybe that is not the case. We both have liked Henderson here on this podcast a fair amount, and we expected him to eat into the workload no matter what, because the draft capital's there, the talent's there, the stats were there from last year.
Yeah, he was a second-round pick just a couple years ago, so it's not like he's some late-round pick that's just been hanging around on the depth chart, because the team likes him. Like, no, they invested pretty heavily in him just a couple years ago.
And under the same staff, this wasn't a different staff that invested that.
Right. Great point.
There was turnover there. So it's consistent from that point. But also now, who are they going to bring in that would be better than Darrell Henderson would have been as a backup? I don't think there is anybody that comes to mind, at least, unless they do a big trade, like you said, with James Robinson or something. But right now, you get basically him in the Cam Akers role without a Darrell Henderson type behind him. The argument could almost be that his situation is now better than what Cam Akers would have been. So whether you like him from a talent perspective or think he can outproduce him, efficiency-wise or whatever, you got to look at that. And if the possibility is there that now maybe it is more of a workhorse role than what it might have been with Cam Akers, which is I wasn't expecting a workhorse role necessarily there. I'm high on him for right now. I could easily get him in top 15.
I was going to say, so he's going basically early second, or Cam Akers was going basically in the early second, maybe late first, depending on your league and how high people like them. But right around that turn area, would you draft Darrell Henderson that high, or would you kind of gamble a little bit and take him a little, if you could get him in like the third or fourth because people don't believe in him? Would you try to maybe wait and gamble? Or do you believe because he's the only guy in town at this moment that you're going to snake him that early?
I would be the guy waiting to get to round 3 because while I believe that he can easily finish inside the top 15, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to draft him inside the top 15. That's where and I know that his ADP is obviously going to shoot up here in the coming weeks. I still don't think it eclipses the third round. I think that is still the ceiling because, again, most people do not perceive him to be at the same talent level or in that same ballpark as Cam Akers. So I think you can get him at an okay discount. So third round, though, I'm very, very comfortable in the third round.
Yeah, I was going to say third, if you could even maybe, depending on where you're at, if you're like right at the turn of the fourth, maybe. He's still, we'll see what happens with ADP here in the next month until all of our redrafts kick off. But yeah, if I could get him in that third, fourth round, knowing that at this moment of what we know, it looks like he's going to be the workhorse back essentially in that backfield. Yeah, I would take that discount all day. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So then,
are we about to ask each other the exact same question? I think we might, but you go ahead.
All right. So looking ahead then for Dynasty, Achilles, very serious injury. Marlon Mack just had it last year. He's coming back. We've talked about that where we think maybe he re-signed with Indianapolis. Maybe he wasn't 100% and wanted to be able to prove himself this year. How does this affect, do you think, Cam Akers' dynasty value? Because Achilles it's not an ACL where ACLs are those are basically like a standard injury to come back from this year. I hate to say that so flippantly because it's a very serious injury, but basically you can come back from those and play at a very high level. Where Achilles, that's still a little bit different ball game. So how do you see his dynasty value moving forward next season?
it definitely plummets no matter what. And but definitely because we haven't seen people come back from an Achilles at the running back position and maintain a high level. We've seen it at other positions, and that's fine. And if you want to extrapolate that to this position, I think that's dangerous. Emmanuel Sanders or those types who've come back from an Achilles injury, it's not the same. You're not cutting the same way as running backs have to do constantly. And so I'm just out. Unfortunately, I'm out on Akers in Dynasty. Marlon Mack will be at least a decent reference point, hopefully, so we can see what he's able to do this year. He's not going to be obviously in the same type of role that Akers would be in, but at least we'd have an idea, because right now we're working off of like Deonta Foreman from a couple of seasons ago.
And we saw how well that worked out.
So there's just not a big enough sample size. And I mean, because I think you still have to give at least a second. I mean, that's the worst you would probably be able to get him for, I would assume, right? I haven't seen any trades go down or anything that's been posted to Twitter involving him.
I think it's probably a little early for those trades to be happening.
Yeah.
But I agree. And a lot of it depends on what Darrell Henderson does this season too. Like if he balls out and he's essentially a high-end RB2, like that's going to depress Cam Akers' value moving forward as well. So I think there's I mean, it's obviously too early to tell, but yeah, I think if you were able to trade Cam Akers prior to this injury when his trade value was at its peak, you did well. And you made out like a freaking bandit, obviously, because I don't think his value is ever going to eclipse or reach what it was even just yesterday.
Yeah, it sucks. I just don't think it can get there because of what the injury is. Now, Darrell Henderson, on the other hand, if you're a contender in Dynasty too, or even if you're not, I mean, that second round pick, if you can get him for a second round pick, I would absolutely be doing that, because more than likely the situation this year is the volume that he's going to get. And like you said, if he still impresses this year and they feel comfortable with him this year, there's nothing really saying he can't be the guy next year too. They don't have a ton of draft capital. It's the Rams have always been giving away their future. And so I haven't looked at next year's exactly, but I know that they are down a good amount of picks. So could be interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess for Dynasty, wait and see. Like you said, I think Marlon Mack could be a good barometer as far as in his limited role of what we're going to see from him this year, see how his explosiveness comes back and everything. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, it's sad news for Cam Akers and the Cam Akers GMs out there. You hate to see it. I've made it very clear. I wasn't very high on Cam Akers, but you never like to see a serious injury like this from any NFL player. So whether I'm high on them or not, I hate to see it. So sending lots of love out there to you, Cam. Hopefully you have a speedy and good recovery so you can prove me wrong next season and come back at the level that everyone was expecting this year. Please go.
It would be bother to have him be the poster boy for coming back in a positive way from this injury, though. So he's obviously very young, and so hopefully that's the deal there. But you never know. Never know.
Yep. All right. So enough with the news here. Let's get into our beer of the week, Jake. And you provided this beer, so why don't you tell us about this?
I sure did. So I feel like I've been trying to get you to try this beer for a few weeks. Now, spoiler, I've had a couple of these prior. But it's from Wasatch
prior
Brewery.
to the podcast tonight, or just in general?
Prior to yes, both. Because it was prior to the podcast, even if it was days ago.
Well, you know what I meant, though.
I do, but it doesn't mean I can't be an absolute asshole about it.
Oh, fine.
No, this was days ago. But it's an apricot Hefeweizen. I've never in my life seen a beer besides this one that has apricot in it. So I was interested and skeptical, but I had to try it, and I thought very good. But Dustin, what say you?
Yeah, it's not too bad. I don't know if I could drink a ton of them because it is a little sweet. I mean, it's 4.8% alcohol, so this is a very much a lawnmower beer, a good summer drinking beer when it's hot like we have now and all the humidity here in Wisconsin. This is a good beer as a refreshing beer, but as far as drinking more than a couple of them, like I said, it's a little sweet for me.
Yeah. This one I'd mix in other beers in between. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like throw a regular old golden ale or something in between this.
I mean, the thing that gets me is that this is a Hefeweizen. So typically you get like that banana and clove flavor from the yeast in Hefeweizens. Where this, it's like just straight apricot. But it's got more of like a wheat
apricot.
But it's got more of like a wheat beer type body to it. So it's not like you're drinking like a Bud Light apricot, just like a flavored light beer.
Right. Oh,
like it's not like that. Like it's got some body and it's got a little oomph to it, but it's definitely all apricot, right on the tongue. It's not a bad. I like it. I mean, it's not a bad beer, but not one that I could drink a ton of by any means.
Can I be honest with you? When you start getting really into the descriptors for beer, and I've noticed this with other guests who are really into beer, like Chris Allen is a prime example. When you guys talk about beers in those words, everything's like about body and how it hits your tongue. It makes me borderline uncomfortable. I thought you were going to start saying things like it's a very voluptuous beer.
I'll make sure to add that to my descriptors for the next time.
This beer really has an hourglass figure on my tongue. Like, what in the fuck are we doing, Dustin?
Well, now you're just being ridiculous. Hourglass figure. Come on.
I'm saying here.
No beer connoisseur would ever use that descriptor.
maybe somebody has. I don't know. There's room for it now. You can do. You can be that guy. There's a space for you to be that guy if you want to, Dustin. But no, I like it. But I brought myself a second because I'm fine drinking multiples of these in a row personally. Nice. But all right, we did that. Now here's the sad thing, Dustin.
This is very sad.
We have
sad Price is Right music.
Yeah, our favorite segment because our cuppeth have runneth dry of drunk trades currently. So, dear listener, if you want us
listeners, plural. We have more than one listener, I hope.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking to each individual listener.
You're talking to
That's how I operate. I like to make it a personal experience on the podcast, Dustin.
All right, fair enough.
Each person to feel that I'm speaking to their eardrums.
No, fair enough. I will back up. I'm sorry.
So, dear listener, if you want to submit your drunk trade, please do that at Drinking Fantasy on Twitter. You can submit it via our website. You can submit it to us via
to our
Instagram.
personal Twitters. At Drake Trowbridge and at FF Dusty Dog. I mean, submit it anywhere. Multiple places to submit these to us. So, or
I'm
even
this
just
close
if you're
to leaving my
trade,
cell phone number for people to text me. I'm desperate to get your drunk trades, people.
Yeah, even just put it in a tweet and tag us in it. That would be plenty. There's plenty of ways to get it to us. But we loved hearing these. Please get them to us. It is our most favorite thing to talk about. Is the drunk trades, like for real. I love to see what people do and the decisions they make when they're drunk. And maybe I'll put a little onus on myself here to get drunk and make some trades too. Because there's been none for me.
I know. I've submitted a couple of my own.
Maybe I need to push myself. I mean, and take one for the Drinking Fantasy team here, so to speak.
Get wild with it, Dustin.
Yeah.
Throw back a couple of cocktails. Open up that MFL or that sleeper app and just let the good times roll.
I'll have to. I'll have to make sure I hit the whiskey on the weekends later at night, so I can really just slide into that.
Please do, dear Lord, please do. All right, but so for now we will bypass that. But before we get into the redraft strategies, the stuff that will help you win your league, I do want to help you travel this summer. This episode is presented by Omio. They are a travel booking platform that makes planning a journey in Europe and North America effortless. Just enter your travel details and Omio will magically give you all the train, bus, flight, and ferry options for your journey. Never been simpler to book your first real vacation for 2021. Best of all, using Omio saves you time and money. They want to help you leave your house by offering 5% off your next booking. Just head to omio.com and use the code OMIO5. That's OMIO5 at checkout. Valid until July 31st. You have just over a week. This is for new users. Plan, book, and love the journey. Terms and conditions apply.
Thank you, Jake. That was very well done. All right, so here we go. We're going to get into it. We got our redraft strategies, tips, tools, and tricks. Not really tricks, but tips and tools to win your redraft league this year. So this is going to be a very loose conversation, very flowing. We'll see where it heads off here. But let's start with, I think, one of the most important things for your redraft league, especially if you're in your home league. And that's kind of how I visualize most redraft leagues, is it's with your buddies, it's with a home league, or maybe it's with a work league where you're working with, with some of your coworkers. It's with people generally. I know, like on Twitter, us degenerates out there, we'll get into a league with anyone. It doesn't matter who it is. Redraft, dynasty, best ball. It doesn't matter. We just love drafting.
We have no standards.
Being in our leagues. Yes.
No standards whatsoever. We just.
But I think for the average listener out there, and I'm speaking to you, listener. I think the average listener is in a league with either friends, family, like I said, coworkers. So specifically for that, it's really important to know your teammates and know your league mates, because you'll know how their drafting tendencies. You know what their team is, their favorite team. Things like that. Like you can really take advantage if you're a more plugged in fantasy football player. And if you're listening to our podcast, I would assume you are. I'm assuming we're not the only podcast you listen to.
I kind of hope it is. Is that?
That would be nice.
Okay.
That would be nice.
All right.
Oh, a little shout out to Miller Badger. Hello. He says hello.
Badger, like these fucking Badgers, huh? You see
There
how I
you go.
whip that hat? I always
That's
keep
nice.
a Badger paraphernalia right next to me.
Yeah, right there.
There you go.
So use your league mates, know their tendencies, know their favorite team. You're probably going to know who their favorite players are if you've been in a league with them for multiple years. Use that to your advantage. If you know, and I'll throughout this podcast, I'll end up referring to the home league that Jake and I are both in, just as a reference. But we have certain people in our league that draft certain players or certain players from teams because it's their favorite team or their favorite players. So use that to your advantage, where you are not, you don't have to draft those specific players or reach for them unless you really think they're going to have a great season. Then obviously reach for your player and go for your player that you want. But really, those players are probably going to be drafted a good round at least before they should, and what you're comfortable doing. So let them do that, and let the value fall to you. So use what your league mates' tendencies are to your advantage. It's like seriously the one big leg up that you have in your league.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the times it is very transparent. Like this league that we're talking about, there's a Raiders fan in there that you can set a clock to it. A Swiss quartz watch cannot be more in tune than what we are to what his draft is going to look like. It's going to be Josh Jacobs round 1. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's going to happen. It was the same thing when Marshawn Lynch was the running back there. Marshawn Lynch round 1. It doesn't even, it's not always going to be maybe that obvious. But a lot of the times, obviously, these people better than almost anybody, probably even better than their own families, because you play football with them. You play fantasy football with them. Yeah, I don't think that can be overstated.
Yeah, and kind of the next couple here that I want to just bring up is it's kind of in that same vein. It's one, knowing who's been drafted and what your other league mates, what positions they've already drafted, so you know which positions they're not going to attack. Or maybe they are, because maybe they like to have 3 tight ends on their team and they're going to draft them early or something. I mean, there's always those outliers, but really know your teammates' roster before you pick or before the next round of picks. Say you're at the end of a round or you're on the turn, knowing like, okay, these teams don't have a quarterback yet. It's kind of that mid to late round area. Is there quarterbacks on my list that I want? Do I think they're going to make it to the next turn in 24 picks from me? You got to kind of keep that in mind and just be aware of how the draft is unfolding and what your league mates have done. And then also, this is very much in conjunction with that, but let the draft come to you. Mm-hmm. If there is maybe we can talk about this in a little bit more detail, but if there is a run of running backs to start your draft and you're at the 11, 12 turn and there's been 9 running backs taken, well, maybe you want to hold off on running back and take advantage of the wide receivers, or maybe take Travis Kelce or George
Mm-hmm.
Kittle that's still there, or maybe if you're into it, take, Mahomes, as an early round quarterback. I mean, just because there's been a run on a position, don't ever end a tier. You want to be the start of a tier.
Now, I kind of want to disagree with you there, but I'm glad you brought up tiers, because I do want to focus on tier-based drafting. This is one of those things. I think it's the biggest mistake I made as a more novice redrafter was I've got my rankings or some other site's rankings, whatever I want to use.
ESPN, Sleeper, whatever.
Hopefully you have somebody that you trust a little bit more than just general consensus rankings. But if you want to use that, fine.
Maybe you could check out DTFF's rankings.
Yeah.
And tiers when we get those published as we get closer to redraft season.
I mean,
I'm just saying.
Idea. If you wanted to go over to drinkingandtalkingff.com and look at those, I think that would be right within your best practices, quite frankly. And as we get closer to the redraft, we will have that available for you. So thank you for the call out, Dustin. But I do just want to say rankings are not necessarily the be all end all, because there's a lot lost in rankings. RB8 versus RB14 might be separated by very little. And you have to sometimes just rank these guys in order, because that's how rankings work. But you might have them very close in your actual projections or what you would expect them to finish. The range of outcomes can be very similar. So don't stick to just ranking and say, well, my RB7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are off the board. I better get 12 because they're dropping like flies. Well, no. How close in actuality are these guys to you in your projections? Get a tier. Now I'm going to put 8 guys in this tier for the top tier of running backs. And then I have 5 in the next tier and 10 in the next tier and so forth.
Yeah.
And use that as your gauge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for instance, just as you're talking about projections here, my projections that I have available on our website, from running back 11 to running back 15, so it's six spots, they are my projections within 10 points of each other. So it's essentially 1 touchdown.
Yep.
I mean, that's nothing to jump you into being an RB1 on the season as opposed to a high-end RB2. It's literally less than 10 points. So that's where tiers are important. And then you also have that group of players where you're like, okay, if this player's here to this player, however big your tier is, and your tier could be 1 player, it could be 3 players, it could be 15 players. And that's all up to you. But as long as you have those players in that tier, you'll know as your draft is playing out that, okay, I've got, say, 6 guys left in this tier. Do I think they're going to come back to me within the next round?
Right.
So because they're all that similarly ranked and close for you, it doesn't matter necessarily if you get the first guy or the last guy in the tier, because they're all ranked essentially the same. They're essentially the same guy, unless of course you have unless you have this feeling, and that's where intuition and gut feeling kind of comes into play. If you feel like, say, I don't know, J.K. Dobbins. Say you really believe he's going to get the workload, but he's in a tier of players that are all kind of in that range. maybe you do grab him first, even though he's projected or not ranked as high as the other players in your tier. That's why, or as far as their rank, they're 1 through 36 ranking. If they're all in this tier, but you believe in that player more, you can take that player, because chances are it's all going to end up coming out in the wash in the end, and it's not going to make that big a difference.
Now, there's still differences for players within my tiers that I have. So to your example, if I see Dobbins as the highest potential, the biggest boom of that tier, but maybe he doesn't have the safety that some others do in that tier. But I think by season's finish, they'll all finish around each other.
The same
rankings
spot,
are on a per game basis, then that's fine. And you may not do your tiers that way. You may base your tiers based off upside only or whatever. But you also have to look at roster construction. And a lot of these things that we're talking about tonight have to be put together in conjunction. It's not just one thing that you're looking at when you're on the clock. You're looking at all these things. But to bring it back to your statement there about don't worry about getting the last guy in your tier when you see this run. That's actually when I do that. I just said do, by the way, and I've acknowledged it, and I think we can all move on now. But I do take the last guy in that tier because that's how my tiers are set up. And so if there's a substantial drop-off from tier number 2 to tier number 3, then I do want that last guy. And I might zig when everybody's zigging. There is something to be said for that. I know the common phrase is zig when everybody's zagging or whatever. And yeah, that works. But you also need to make sure that you're getting the guys that you want, you feel comfortable with. And so sometimes you do have to reach. That's a dirty little secret. Dustin, would you mind throwing up the second from the bottom comment from Miller Badger, by the way?
I was going to bring these up here. I just was going to let you finish your thoughts first. So, Miller here, he asked, do you prefer going against the grain or going with a player lower in your tier?
So to this point, I would rather go with the player lower than my tier if the drop off from that tier to the next tier is substantial.
Right.
And then yes, I probably do. Value-based drafting is great, and going against the grain can often get you more overall value. But like I say, it depends on positional need at that point. If you're in the middle of your draft and you kind of established your marquee players, and now you're looking to fill out your roster, it's probably going to be a little different than if I was using this at the start of my draft, where maybe best overall value is what I want, or maybe I want to hammer a certain position because they're scarcer in my view. All
right, so then let's answer this other question from Miller here. Is tier drafting easier from the middle of the draft as opposed to the top or bottom, the early picks or the later end of the draft? What do you think?
I don't know if it's easier. What I would say is my tiers tend to go out the window late in the draft. Because late in the draft, it becomes get my guy territory. It's also where ADP falls off the most. In the first few rounds, people are going to be drafting pretty closely to ADP, at least in most leagues.
Probably the first, 5 or 6 rounds, mainly.
I would say that's fair. Yeah. It's not going to be in order of ADP, but it's going to be pretty close in those initial rounds. And so I actually think, I guess the answer to this question for me would be, I think it's easier towards the top and middle than it is from the end to use that to your advantage. Because the running backs, I hate to keep harping on it, but that is the position this year that just is like sticking out to me, because there are so few running backs that I feel amazing about. I feel that there is a big tier of the top 5, like elite running backs. And then there's this nice cozy tier where I'll feel very comfortable with the next 10 guys maybe. And there is a hard drop off into tier 3. And so, yes, I do want to use that early on. I want to make sure I get at least 1 or 2 of those top tier running backs. But that's
so then kind of a little bit different take on this question. What if you're drafting from like the 1 or 2 slot as opposed to like the 11-12 slot, and as opposed to like maybe drafting in the 6th slot right in the middle of the draft? How does do tiers change for you at all? Or, I mean, because for me, tiers are tiers. Whether you're early in the draft or late in the draft, that's what tiers are for. So you have a range of guys to choose from. So you're not kind of pigeonholed into like, oh my God, CMC, his ADP is 1.01 overall. I need to draft him with the first overall pick. I mean, that's why you have your range of, say, and I'm just going to throw this out here, say, CMC, Barkley, and Delvin Cook as your tier 1 running backs. And again, this is just hypothetical here. So that way if you have all 3 there and you're picking out of, the 1 or 2 slot, you can say, okay, these 3 are in my first tier. This is what I value most. I'm happy with getting any one of these 3 guys. So I think tier-based drafting works no matter what your draft position is. But I agree, Jake. Jake, as you get later in the draft, it's not nearly as important as early in the draft.
Yeah. Like you said, the tiers are the tiers. That doesn't change based on what your draft position is. What changes is how much you need to use those. And the thing about letting the draft come to you, that's a lot easier said than done.
It is.
From the ends or the beginning of the draft round, right? In the middle, you have plenty of space to work with, and there's not so many picks between rounds for you that you have to worry as much about runs. It's a little easier for you to project, can I get this guy from this tier in the next round, or do I have to take him now? It's very, very difficult when you are drafting, let's say at the 111, right? And then you get your 202 pick coming around, and now you have to wait and wait until the 311 comes back around. Super good band, by the way, bruh. 311.
Well, Amber, one of the best songs ever. Color
of your tiers. Something. God damn it! I had something better than that. Come back to me later. I'll have a better pun. But it gets really concerning when you have to wait that many picks in between, and that's like it becomes. I don't know how you feel about this. It becomes for me more get my guy territory throughout the entire draft, because it's going to be too fucking hard for me to guarantee that they're coming back.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you really, really want them, you're going to have to reach, quote unquote.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm on either end, if I pick in the first couple picks, or I'm more at the 11, 12, I will not hesitate to reach on a guy that I don't think is going to make it back to me, that I feel like is going to have a great season, as far as like, I like what their team situation is, or maybe if it's a wide receiver, their quarterback, or if I expect the offense in general to take a big jump forward. I would not hesitate to go get your guy. I mean, and that's one thing, like, go get your guy. I mean, really, if you believe in them, and it's a guy you want on your team because you want to root for them every week, because it's one of your favorite players, just go do it. Like, I mean, we kind of made light of the fact that, we know certain people in our redraft league are going to pick certain players from certain teams, but they're going to go get their guy. And ultimately that's what it all comes down to. Like, go get your guy. You're supposed to have fun with the league. It's your team. Build it how you want. Ultimately, in the end, I mean, hopefully you're entering your league to try to win your money back. If this is a money league, like, that's the ultimate goal, and to win the championship, so bragging rights over you
and everybody else's dignity. That's what you get if you're the winner of a free league, by the way. You don't only get your dignity back, but you get to collect everybody else's in your league, which is fun.
Yeah, and it's just fun to lord over everybody else, saying that you're the champion for an entire calendar year, essentially. You get to say, I am the champion. It doesn't matter how your team does in the middle of that next season. You could be tanking. Yeah. You're still technically the champion until a new champion is crowned.
I know that the pandemic was awful, obviously, and we hated it. But those people in 2019 who won, and then their league maybe didn't play in 2020 because of everything, and they got an extra year to lord it over. I mean, as far as silver linings go, it's something.
Absolutely. And then I just want to post this up here real quick from Miller. Thanks for answering. #Bucks&6. Go Bucks. Let's bring a championship home here tonight. I am really excited for this.
As Wisconsin sports fans, we're not allowed to get too excited at this moment.
True.
Because how sad it can be. But
I'm not going to watch the game because I haven't watched a game all season, so I feel like I'll jinx the team if I actually tune in. So I'm going to do my part and not watch the game tonight. I will wake up in the morning and see if we won. So that's enough basketball talk for this podcast here. Let's stick to football.
Right.
Jake, what's something that you like to do, or what's something that you feel like is really important to win your redraft league?
One quick thing I want to highlight before we completely move away from tiers, or at least for now, is within those tiers, what I also like to do personally is highlight those players within the tier that I am very much higher than consensus on versus ADP, and how much I'm lower on, so that I have it's stuck in my head, the barometer of, okay, this is where they fall within my tiers, but I know that more than likely nobody is going to be drafting these guys around this level that I value them at. So just as like a kind of keen reminder, that's the thing. That way, if they're in that tier and they're the last guy in that tier, you can probably say to yourself, well, okay, there's a good chance they'll fall another round or two. I don't have to get too hyped here.
Right.
And I can still get them and feel comfortable with it.
Right.
The last bit about that, yeah. But aside from that, boy, I know this is it's a hot topic every year on Twitter. And the very word now, I think, has overwhelmed people to the point that they don't even want to use it. Sleepers. Dustin, we have to talk about sleepers. People say there's no such thing.
Kevin Bacon?
Not the Kevin Bacon movie, but an amazing movie.
Just making sure.
Yeah, and Brad Pitt was in that movie. God, that was a good movie.
Was that Kiefer Sutherland in it too?
Was Kiefer? There was a lot of people in that movie.
It was a very star-studded movie.
The Golden God from Almost Famous is in that movie. Oh,
yeah.
People. Yeah. Gosh, great poll. In any case, not that sleepers, but I'm totally going to watch that after this episode. And listener, you should too. But sleepers themselves, people are saying there's no such thing as a sleeper anymore. We have too much information. Everybody knows every player. There's no such thing as a sleeper. So just a real quick definition that I would like to give for sleepers. It might be different than what you have, Dustin. A sleeper, to me, is somebody that the vast majority of people do not project to have a high-level finish for the season, meaning they are likely not going to be in the top, I'm just throwing this number out, 25% of players at the finish, 30% of players, at their position, whatever your barometer is. But that's, to me, what a sleeper is. So maybe the old definition doesn't work anymore, but I still think it's practical to use this because it's players that the vast majority of people, and likely your league mates, are not going to be super high on. So for me, identifying those players, still important.
Yep.
As we get into the late rounds, get your guy territory, like we were talking about earlier. It's nice to have those names right top of mind. That ADP is very low. If you got to reach for him, because let's get your guy, reach for him. Get your individual sleepers. And don't tell anybody what they are. Keep them to yourself. You don't want to be advertising your sleepers unless you happen to have a goddamn podcast where it's kind of your job to. And then all of our league mates can listen to this episode or other episodes forthcoming, wink, wink, that will highlight these sleepers. But yeah, I think it's important to have your own personal list. Dustin, do you do that? Do you have a list of sleepers that you pocket away for the late rounds?
Yeah, I do. There's guys that I definitely feel like could pop out, or if I feel like there is an opportunity that could arise should the breaks go the right way for players. Yeah, I definitely have my list of players that I'll go after, whether they're sleepers or late round targets, whatever you want to classify them as. Yeah, I always have those. And again, like we kind of said at the outset here, chances are your home league is not as plugged in or as degenerate as you are in fantasy football. So they may not even be thinking about sleepers or guys. They could just go for players that is more name recognition. Thank God I can speak clearly here. They may go for the guys that they just know the names of and draft those players only because they're like, oh, for instance, Randall Cobb, I know that guy. He's still available in the 12th round. Sure, I'll take him. It may be more of that rather than a player that has real potential upside. Like I said, if the situation breaks right for them. So yeah, definitely have your list of players, whether you want to call the sleeper or late round target or the get your guy, double digit round type players. And then, kind of throw ADP out the window at that point, and just go get those players. Because really at the end of the draft, and this is how I like to build my drafts. And maybe we should have started with this. But personally, I like, the first 5 or 6 rounds, I'm building my core. Like, these are your starters. These are the guys you're going to play week in and week out, barring injury or bye weeks. And then after that, you're starting to shoot for these more upside players or players that have potentially a path to a starting role, whether it's like a backup running back, God forbid, Darrell Henderson. Perfect example. This is a guy that you normally take a little bit later in drafts that isn't the starter, but has that potential to get into the starting role. So you want to, kind of take those players later and build your roster on high upside guys, unless that's not your thing. If you don't like risk and you want guys that are a safe floor that are going to get you, a specific number of points each week. For instance, say maybe like last year, Cole Beasley, late round pick that had a very safe floor week in and week out.
Jarvis Landry types, Tyler Boyd types, right?
Yeah, it really depends on how you want to build your team, and that's the great thing about fantasy is you can build your team any number of ways for what you're comfortable with and what you will have most fun with. Because again, as we said, it's all about having fun in the end. Like we're here to have fun. Enjoy fantasy football, root for the guys you like to root for the teams you like to root for. It's no fun having players for instance, I shouldn't say never, but almost never have Joe Mixon on my team because I don't particularly like him as a running back and don't want to have to root for him. So chances are, unless he were to fall ridiculously low where the value is so good that I can't possibly pass it up, I probably won't have him on a team just because I don't want to root for him.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm that guy who's like, if I don't like even if there's something real sketchy off the field, I'm out. There's a lot of those guys that I'm probably not going to draft, and I'm comfortable with that, and I'm missing out on their potential value and all of that, and that's fine. But I'm comfortable leaving them to other league mates. Now, I do want to talk. We should dive into roster construction a little bit more here. So you mentioned that you like the upside guys later. So am I assuming that when you're saying, you're identifying your early round starters, you're looking more at what their floor or what their worst case scenario would be for those early rounds and not so much about what their upside is, or what do you do for those first 3 rounds?
I mean, just because I am a degenerate with fantasy football, I statted out every single team. And so I will go and I'll build my own tiers based on my projections and what I feel like each player is going to have based on what I projected them at. So I will go for the players that have both a safe floor, but a lot of upside as well. So for instance, like Zeke this year is falling a little bit in drafts compared to previous years where he was a top 5 pick. He's going in that later first round. He's someone I want to target all day, especially if I'm in that later half of the first round to get him, because not only is he a safe floor, I think he can return and beat that ADP and be he has the potential to be a top 3 back in the league. I don't think he's lost that in that offense. That's someone that I would really love to get if I'm sitting in the later half of the first round. And hopefully he would fall to me. So it's kind of a combination of both. I want players that will give me that consistency every single week, because you can't miss in the first couple rounds. Because if you miss in the first couple rounds, you're really behind the 8 ball for the rest of the season. So I like that little mix of both safety and floor and consistency plus additional upside. But then once I get to those later rounds, I am all about the upside players, because chances are they're not going to pan out, and I'll end up dropping them after a few weeks and picking up other players that I think are showing more potential upside.
Yeah. I'll take it one step further. the balance of upside and floor, I like to get that at every position.
Well,
with the players.
Ideally, yes.
No, and I don't mean with individual players either. I mean, I like to pair a high upside guy with a safe floor guy at every position. I mean, onesie positions, obviously, quarterback, tight end. It's less practical and less efficient, especially if it's in a one quarterback league or you don't have deep benches or whatever. Then, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. But for running back and wide receiver especially, I want the floor play. And I do need the floor play because I am a baby who needs a blankie at every position to make me feel confident that no matter what happens, this guy's going to get me 12 points every week, whatever it is. But I am absolutely pairing every position with that shoot for the moon play. So a Tyler Lockett, I think, is a great example. And we talked about this last week with JJ Zacharyson. Shout out to JJ for being on the show last week. Tyler Lockett's ADP, it's so low. And the reason is because people fear his inconsistency. But it's also so low, meaning you can go get your wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, who are going to be more consistent than Tyler Lockett will be. Meaning you have your floor. And now you can put this guy who can get you 50 points in a week into your lineup with them. And if he gooses you, if he gives you nothing, okay, that sucks. But you need to have those week winners, I think, on your team. But I just can't do all week winners. Like I can't handle so much volatility. I need a little bit of comfort there. Is that your vibe?
I'm the same way. Like really, and that's, like I said, those early round picks I'm looking for more consistency than upside. I'd like to have a good combination of both. But yeah, Tyler Lockett's like the perfect example. Like, and he's like the great like flex play or bye week fill-in because he does have that opportunity to just blow up and give you a 50-point week. But also, for whatever reason, we all expect DK Metcalf to be the main guy there. What if for some reason that doesn't happen? I mean, there's nothing saying that he is going to be the guy. It could go back to Tyler Lockett. Not probable, but it's within. There's a more than 0% chance that could happen.
Lockett has out-targeted him in the last 2 years that Metcalf has been in the league. So
I'm just saying, taking him, even though he may have that volatility, perceived volatility, he could end up being a very safe target come season.
That's a fair point.
I mean, we don't know. Like we're all just projecting and supposing here of what we think is going to happen. But end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, I mean, really.
Speak for your goddamn self, Dustin. I've prophesized so much of this season. The only reason I don't post it all on Twitter definitively is because I don't want to rub it in too much. I like to maintain my status as an even-keeled guy. That's the only reason I'm not posting all of my sure thing takes. I do want to talk about, late rounds. We've talked about the sleepers, of course, and our late round targets. I want to delve into that just a little bit more because one of the things that can be tricky and frustrating in redraft is depending on how much of a bench you have to work with and how active your waiver wire is and all that, it's sometimes not practical to have targets in those late rounds that you're going to have to stash for at least a few weeks before you know anything about their situation. I don't want what we might call a roster clogger on my team for that many weeks. What I want out of those late round targets is somebody who's going to come in week 1 and prove either I made a great call or I made a dumb call, and now I can drop you and put somebody else in that spot. Is there any sort of method that you use at the end? Like, let me ask this. What's your comfort level? How many weeks will you hold a guy to see what you have?
Oh, good question. I mean, in our home league, and I know we've talked about this probably last season, we have a very limited number of waiver wire transactions. So I will hold on to players until the very bitter end, until I literally cannot, like if there's injuries or something where I have to, there's a better option on the waiver wire, then I will make the claim. But I'll usually give them, 3-4 weeks, get a quarter of the way through the season. If they haven't at least shown something, or they're, or if they're injured and maybe that's what's been hampering them and not producing like I thought, I'll hold on to them. But after that, I would drop them and try to identify a different target that maybe has flashed a little bit, or again, has that potential to step into a larger role.
And your method would have worked out much better last year for, say, Justin Herbert than my method, where after week 1, I would have been like, well, nope, get this guy off my fucking team. And I would have to pay the price for that. And obviously this is not a one-size-fits-all for all players either on your team. But, I'm always just curious, what's your threshold for holding a guy that's just like, you're not doing anything. You're that meme of just like poking the thing with the stick and like do something.
Yeah, I tend to be the guy that holds on way too long because I feel like I have insider information from the analysis that I do.
Sure.
So it's paralysis by too much information, basically. I can't let go of the guys I'm high on for whatever reason.
You had analysis paralysis at your fingertips, by the way, Dustin. It rhymed in everything. And you zagged. I feel like you zagged on purpose to not rhyme, just to kind of piss me off. You're like,
yes,
nope,
that's my entire intent.
Information. I don't know. What's another word for information?
I missed an opportunity there.
Now,
because they're rhyme, they're both verbs.
It's true. It's true. Actually, that's not true. Analysis is not. Analyze is a verb.
Well,
analysis.
I was trying to quote Talladega Nights there, so I apologize.
Now that's shame on me for not getting that reference. My journalism major, Dick Hedishbring, was like, nope, you said it wrong. Let me jump in. But Dustin, I am curious positionally. So I talked about, like, I want to pair a high upside guy with a safe floor guy at every position if possible. But outside of that, so is there anything you look at when you're going after running backs that you don't necessarily look at for wide receivers? I mean, they're running the ball versus catching the ball. Outside of that thing, though, like, are you looking at the offense more for running backs versus the talent for wide receivers, or is there anything like that?
Specifically for running backs, what I'm looking for early rounds, you're looking for that workhorse running back. The running back that has a high workload, preferably a pass catcher, but we have those exceptions of like Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb, where they don't necessarily get the pass catching, but they're going to get like 90% of the handoffs and most likely those goal line touches. But otherwise, I'm looking for running backs that have that workhorse role. And then later in drafts, I'm looking for more pass catchers, guys that have that PPR upside. Because
James White, a Giovanni Bernard, those types.
Yes. Yeah. The guys that are going to be more involved on a week-to-week basis, that you don't have to rely on them carrying the ball. They're going to be involved in the passing game no matter what. And then the other thing I look at too is I do not draft my own early round handcuffs. So if I have Zeke, say I draft him early, I'm not going to go draft Tony Pollard later in the draft because chances are Zeke's not going to get hurt. He's been very healthy for the majority of his career. Tony Pollard's just he's going to become that roster clogger for you. Yep. He's just going to sit on your bench, and then you're kind of hoping for an injury to your stud running back, which you never want to do that. Like, I get it's insurance, but you don't ever want to hope for injury. I'm going to go out and get, say, Kareem Hunt as opposed to Tony Pollard, because Kareem Hunt has a carved out definitive role, and if Nick Chubb were to get injured, you'd instantly have an RB1 on your team.
Yep.
So that's what I'm looking for later on as well. I will never draft my own team's handcuff because that's just a waste of space.
I love that. And I've not even really thought about that. I don't think I've ever done that. The lone exception might have been the Lev Bell holdout year, where you knew the very likelihood was that he wasn't going to start. I think I took Connor in the last round just to be sure, but that's another case. I would know week one whether I needed him or not, and then you could drop him. It's not true with most handcuffs. But would you go get another pure handcuff, not like a Kareem Hunt who has utility whether Chubb is there or not. Would you draft somebody else's pure handcuff, though?
So like an Alexander Madison, maybe?
Perfect example. Yep, back up to Dalvin Cook. You haven't drafted Cook. Would you take Madison?
Right. If he fell in the draft to a position where I felt comfortable taking him, yes. One, because Dalvin Cook has had an injury history where he has been banged up. Not that he's missed a ton of games, but he seems to get banged up every year where he misses at least a couple of games.
Right.
So in that specific instance, yeah, I would. It really depends how the draft is going, and if I feel like I need a little bit more running back depth, and if I feel like that handcuff, so to speak, would have an opportunity to play.
Fair.
I mean, I just don't want to draft. I don't want to draft a handcuff running back just to be like, oh, I want to get that guy's handcuff. Because, again, it could become a roster clogger. So it really depends on the situation and team makeup as the draft is going.
Gotcha. Now, let us talk a little bit, though, we're talking about injuries. We're talking about handcuffs, which necessitates an injury to the guy in front of him. So, injury prone. Let's throw those words out there just so that Edwin Porras can hear it as his bat signal and come swooping in. I'm guessing any minute now. That's not his favorite phrase.
It's not my favorite phrase either, I'll be honest.
It's out there. It's in the zeitgeist. People believe injury prone is a thing, and they have players in their head that are injury prone. And it may not be the case. Keenan Allen is the prime example of this. I think we talk about him every year, but it's still relevant every year. Like there's this idea
is the poster child for that.
2 years, I believe, back to back, he got injured and missed almost the entire season. Totally freak, unrelated injuries, right? It was just a bad luck string, but now he's injury prone in everybody's heads. So that's a good area to exploit with your draft mates if they believe they're injury prone. But should that be confused with the injury dip? Meaning somebody got injured toward the end of last season. We haven't really seen them in action yet. And the value is decreasing because of that.
Right.
So Saquon might be a good example of this. Let's use him. So injury prone? No.
Yeah, Saquon works. I was thinking Joe Burrow as well. Like he had that late season knee injury. But both those players are like great examples. Yeah, Saquon specifically, I don't think he's injury prone. I think he tried to come back last season. He played through some injuries. I think he's going to come back healthy. I know, for instance, he's saying that there's no timetable for his return. I'm confident. I'm fairly confident that he'll be back week 1. So I would be willing to draft him in the top 3 personally overall. I don't think I think he's going to come back that specifically with Saquon. Like their offense is going to be so much improved this year with him back in the offense. They got Kenny Golladay. Hopefully all their wide receivers are actually healthy. I mean, it should be a much more high-powered offense than what we've seen. So if Saquon were to fall to me outside the top few picks, I would gladly snag him up because I think he's going to come back and beast out this year.
Then I think he's a perfect example because right now he is RB6 in PPR ADP. RB6, that's outside that top 5 that you're talking about here.
Who's going ahead of him? Just curiosity.
So we have obviously the ones that make the most sense. We have CMC and Dalvin Cook going off the board number 1 and 2. Both of them I'm taking above Saquon for the comfort there, even though, as we talked about, Cook has missed plenty of time or enough time. But then Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Zeke Elliott are your 1 through 5 there.
I would take Barkley 2.
2. You would take him over Cook.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, coming out of college, and I know it's been a number of years. He hasn't played a full healthy season in the last couple. But I mean, he was touted as one of the all-time great prospects. Broke all the metrics at the combine. I mean, he's one of those freak athletes. And I think he is like an Adrian Peterson freak athlete where he's going to come back, he's going to be healed up, and it's like he's not even going to miss a beat. So I'd be confident taking him at number 2 overall over those other running backs because he has a well-defined role. You know, he's going to get he's a workhorse running back. He's going to get pass catching. He's a very good pass catcher. So, I mean, his role is well-defined where some of those other players, you know, Derrick Henry, you're relying on him to break off long runs and get goal line touches. He's not going to get any real pass catching work. Alvin Kamara, we don't know what's happening with that situation at quarterback, you know, so it's I mean, maybe the argument can be made for Dalvin Cook, and I wouldn't fault anybody for taking Dalvin over Saquon. They're kind of neck and neck for me, very close. But yeah, if Saquon were to fall to me at 6, I'd take that all day long, without hesitation.
So that's a prime example. But you're buying the injury dip on Saquon because this time last year he was the number 2 behind CMC easily.
I took him number 2 in a dynasty startup last year. We see how well that worked out for him.
Hey, it'll happen. He'll come back and be fine. But that's the type of thing that I'm talking about. And identifying where you're comfortable with that kind of risk, quote unquote, it's going to be really helpful for you. And you have to make that decision for yourself, though, and what your comfort level is. And obviously, in the first rounds, like you're talking about, it's so important to hit those rounds. That's probably why people fade players coming off of injury. It's because they're terrified of missing on those first couple rounds. As you get later in the draft, people are more comfortable with it.
But at the same time, yes, you want to make sure you get players that are going to play, but freak accidents happen all the time. No one expected Barkley to miss all of last season, essentially.
No, but I just mean if you're worried that he's not fully recovered yet.
Right. Or let's use Joe Burrow as the other example. He got injured, week 10, I believe, last season.
Yeah, right in mid-season.
And in a very gnarly knee injury. So it's is he going to be ready for week 1? It sounds like he's going to be full go and ready to go week 1, but is it going to take him half a season to really feel comfortable on that knee and trust it, where he's not thinking about it, or maybe not wearing a knee brace that is bulky and slows him down? I mean, we don't know. So, but I believe in him with those weapons he has on that offense. Do you believe in him?
Do you believe in him at QB 12, which is where his ADP is right now? That's the question.
Let me look.
Because people are not affording the same injury discount to Joe Burrow that you're getting with Saquon Barkley. I don't think.
I've got him projected, and again, this is projections, not my actual rankings. Got him projected at QB 15. But again, QB 15 to QB 11 is 13 points. So a matter of a touchdown or 2. Sure. So I mean, he's right there as far as being in that conversation. He'd be in that tier for me, going back to what we were saying earlier.
Look at that, tying it together with a goddamn bow on top. But it is just interesting. There are players that are going to get the discount. They're going to fall down the draft boards. There are others that are not for whatever reason, and that's where you have to decide how much you can take advantage of that and how comfortable you feel with it.
Yeah. All right, so we are over an hour here, Jake, and I'm sure we could literally talk about this all night. Is there one more thing that you want to touch on that you feel like our listeners should know?
Yes, I think just one real quick thing that I think gets talked about too much the other way is strength of schedule. I think people fixate on strength of schedule in a weird way at the beginning of the year. They look at that and they treat that as gospel sometimes, that this player faces the second hardest strength of schedule. Oh, I better stay away from him. We don't know anything almost about strength of schedule at this point in the offseason before things actually get underway. We don't. We think we do every year, and the charts from the beginning of the year never come close to matching up to what they are at the end of the year for strength of schedule. And I mean, yes, there's some defenses that are going to be amazing because they are consistent year over year, but that's a rarity, man. Don't put so much stock.
Yeah, we've seen that a number of times. It was Jacksonville a few years ago where they were the number 1 defense, and next year they were at the bottom. Chicago, they had that dominating defense a few years ago. And then the next year, they kind of went back to average, kind of towards the middle of the pack. So, yeah, definitely don't look at, or don't, like you said, don't overthink it early in the season.
As a tiebreaker, I'm fine with it.
Absolutely.
But not as the main thing.
Come playoff time, once we're kind of in the season and you're looking at shoring up your roster per se, making waiver wire moves, then definitely look at the strength of schedule for like your playoffs, the fantasy playoffs, for your roster to make some of those moves of guys or trade targets that you think have a very easy strength of schedule, like David Montgomery this last season. I mean, we talked him up for about 6 weeks saying like, get this guy, pick him up. He's got a great fantasy schedule. Like, and you know what? He did, and he proved it. So early in the season, yeah, I would agree. Don't overthink it. Definitely as a tiebreaker, that's a great point. But that's something more you can focus on as the season goes on, as we get more data with what these teams are actually doing. And the last couple things I want to just talk about real quickly, and it's more of just, I'm going to say it and we don't really have to talk about it. If you still have defenses and kickers in your leagues, draft those in your last 2 rounds. Unless for some reason you get crazy fucking bonuses for like extra long field goals or return yardage, interceptions or something like that for your defense, then maybe that might change it. But really, take your defense and your kicker in the last 2 rounds. And I don't care which order.
Especially defense. No, especially defense. Defense, we just talked about it. You're drafting an entire group, and the likelihood of that being consistent from one year to the next is ridiculous. You just said Jacksonville, prime example. It happens every year. There's somebody who takes a defense in round 10 because they were so amazing last year, and now they're like 15th in the league. It's stupid. Don't do it.
Yeah. So draft those players late. And then the last thing I want to say is I'm going to kind of reiterate what I've said before is you're supposed to be having fun with your drafts in your league. Have fun with it. Draft the players you want to draft. In the end, go get your guys. If that's what's going to make you happy and make you enjoy the fantasy season that much more by rooting for guys you want to root for, then just do it. There is no wrong way to create your team or how to draft your players. We're in this to have fun and root for the players that we want to root for on a weekly basis. So, just don't let your league mates razz you for your players. Stick to your guns. Have some conviction. Go get your guy if you want to root for him. Because in the end, it's a game. We just want to have fun with it.
For sure. But also, you can definitely razz your league mates about their picks because trash talking is easily one of the funnest parts of draft day.
Absolutely. So before we sign off here, Jake, I do want to share one thing, and I don't have it open because because it's poor planning by my part here. So
can I vamp for a quick second about one other thing? My favorite thing about trash talking is when it's and I know this is not tactful, but I don't really care. It's when your league is all there except for one person, and then you spend the entire draft ragging on the one person that's not there. As long as it's in good fun, I think nothing brings a league together more than that occasion happening. Absolutely. And hopefully you can text or message the one person who's not there on occasion to make sure that it's pointed at them still, because that is the right way to do it. Quite frankly, it can't all be behind their back. Some of it has to be to them. Yeah.
So, all right. So I've got the screen ready here. And hopefully it's up here. We can see it. I will make it full screen. Woo! So it's official. We are open to take submissions for our DTFF redraft league this year. We are accepting submissions until August 7th. So we basically got 2.5 weeks here. We're going to take all the submissions. We're going to randomize them, pick the players that are going to be in the league with us for this year. It is redraft, just a standard 12-team PPR redraft league, nothing too crazy. It's 5 easy steps. So check us out on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating or whatever rating you want to give. We prefer a 5-star rating, obviously. Give us a review, what you love about us. Take a screenshot of both and then submit it to @DrinkingFantasy, our Twitter handle. We will take all the submissions, and like I said, we'll randomize them at that point, and you'll get in the league. I think, if I can say this, we're probably going to be on Sleeper this year for redraft. So we are really excited for our inaugural league here. I can't wait to have it. Again, there should be a lot of trash talking in the group chat because Jake and I are very much involved and love to razz each other on a weekly basis here. So expect that for all of our league mates there. Yeah, we're really excited about this. So go out there and get those submissions in. Tell your friends. Have everybody get a submission. Maybe
handful already in, so start getting them in yourself, by the way.
And maybe if we have enough to get 2 leagues, maybe Jake and I will each head up a singular league, and we can have 2 leagues going, depending on how many submissions we get, if we have that much interest. But yeah, we're doing one for sure. You don't want to miss out on the first one. You want to be able to say you got in on the ground floor and join our redraft league this year. Should be a lot of fun.
That's right.
So definitely go
and
check that out.
By the way, in this league, Dustin talked to you about this, but I'm just going to say it here and now. In this league, whoever wins will get a video of myself trash talking on their behalf in the celebrity voice of their choosing. And I will also do a defeat video of my own team if you manage to beat me of the celebrity of your choice, accepting defeat as well. So it'll be a real
cherry on top there. I like that.
Cherry on top.
I personally, I hope that I defeat you so that just get that.
You
knife,
make me do it in like Russell Wilson's voice or some shit.
Oh, probably, because I know he's your favorite talented player. So yes. So yeah, go out and do that. It is our pinned tweet right now. So if you didn't catch any of that, or all of it, I should say, go check out our pinned tweet @DrinkingFantasy on Twitter. That is the handle where you can find us in all of our podcast-related content. Jake, where can people find you out there?
They can find me at Jake Trowbridge.
Yep, and you can find me at FFDustyDog. But please go out and follow us at Drinking Fantasy and ask us questions there. Remember, we want all of your junk trade submissions. We miss those. We like to have those. So we're looking for more. We like to have a ton in the queue ready to go, so we don't have weeks like today where it's kind of sad. Go out and rate and review the podcast, even if you're not going to join our listener league. We really do appreciate that. And go check out our webpage. We have our projections, or I posted my projections team by team stats for the season, by position, by team. We have our rankings, consensus rankings between Jake and I out there as well. And before the draft season starts, we will have a consensus tiers for you as well. So we'll have all the tools you need to win your redraft league this year. So anything else, last words you want to say, Jake, before we head out here?
I'm just excited for football. Like I said, this episode always makes it feel like it's closer, so I'm happy.
End of this week, training camps start. So we are literally at the very end of there being 0 football. So
Coach Speak season coming up. Brace yourselves.
That's right. and get ready for just what should be a riveting season of Hard Knocks.
Indeed.
I can't get enough Mike McCarthy.
I can.
So with all that, folks, thanks for tuning in, and check us back next week. Same great time, same great place. And until then, keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.